in-person questions first, and then we'll let you guys ask questions via Zoom after that, okay? So let's get started. We've got head coach Bronco Mendenhall. Coach will start the press conference off with some comments about the class, and then we'll take questions. When you do ask questions, please identify yourself so Coach can get to know you.
Great. Man, an exciting day for Utah State football. Exciting day for me in launching and being part of a new program. I feel lucky and grateful. So my staff has done a really nice job, coordinators Kevin McGiven and Nick Howell, in terms of framing our needs, and then our staff executing against our needs. As you know, the landscape of college football is significantly different. There's 2 signing periods now, both early and late. And the best way I could describe the difference is the immediacy of roster replacement is really the first need. So if you consider now most programs, so we're signing 36 players. There were classes in past experiences I've had as a head coach where there might be, under 15. And so the numbers, the sheer volume is unlike anything that's really college football has experienced. So the landscape is different. The early signing window, there's an immediacy to assess your current roster and replace those needs with upperclassmen if possible so you can function at the highest level for the next season, right? And it matters, right? The outcomes do matter in year one, even if it's a new coach at a new place. It generates momentum, it generates trajectory, it builds hope, it builds faith, and there's optimism that comes with that. At the same time, you have to be thinking and have another eye on, right, the foundational elements of your program and making sure that, right, your building and the succession planning is coming and solid at the same time. And that's really through high school players and high school players that you've known and that are the ideal fits for your program. That allows you to sign them early as possible. In my perfect world, right, all of our players would be signed in the early window. So when we've been here with more traction and the staff has been here an entire year, that would be my ideal. Is it likely that that would happen without any in the second window? There'll probably always be some as change occurs in college football. The next thing, as I would say, is if you're looking at our roster and saying, or the players that we're signing, and you're then saying, there's 17 four-year players and 12 high school players, with junior college players and a little bit less at 7. Ideally, my formula would be just the opposite, where the majority would be high school players, with then the four-year players supplementing that with junior college players, right, about the same number. And that would be the ideal, with predominantly high school players in state being the core of everything that we do. And so these numbers, and to this point, what you're seeing here reflects, our staff doing an excellent job addressing our needs, both short-term and long-term, with the emphasis that we think will be program defining. And still some needs remaining, quite frankly, and there's a spring portal window coming, and could we be active in that also? That really depends, on attrition through the off-season program still, spring practice, and what that might look like. A year ago, at the University of New Mexico, we needed 17 more scholarship players after spring practice. And so it's unreal, some of the things that can still happen in the world and the landscape of college football. However, what's been done to this point at Utah State, I'm encouraged, I'm optimistic. I think we did really well, and I think the future will be very bright. So I'll take questions.
So I'm Jason Walker with Cash Valley Data.
Hey, Jason.
You mentioned your staff framing the needs that you have for recruiting. Just kind of go over what some of those needs you felt like were there when you first walked into the roster.
Yeah, so in general, the needs were tilted slightly more defensively than offensively in terms of numbers needed and in terms of quality. And so you'll see, I think we signed 19 defensive players, 14 offensive players. And the very first thing we did, and you probably already know this, but we spent 4 days doing nothing other than our staff morning to night evaluating the current Utah State roster when we arrived. So that was 4 days, every position, every player, some that weren't playing, looking at either junior college or high school film, as well as looking at the existing signees that Utah State had. So we went through that our entire roster, knowing also that I was with a program that played against Utah State a year ago. So we went back and dove through all of our notes and looked at those evaluations also. That then helped us frame the needs for Utah State, again, slightly more defensively than offensively. Some had changed already because of players entering the portal, right? So it wasn't just we were looking at last year's team. It was last year's team now with portal players leaving also, addressing that, and then also addressing it in relation to a league we just became familiar with, which helped us be more accurate. And so really that's what I would frame to this point.
Head coach Ajay Salveson, Ag Sports Radio Network.
Hey.
I wanted to ask about spring practice. There's some coaches canceling their spring scrimmages and such, afraid that other schools are watching them and that they could poach their players. So it's almost a showcase. Is there any concern on your end about having that happen for you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. And so there are rules that are supposed to be governing tampering, but they're not enforced. They're not enforced effectively, and they're having very little impact on the decisions made. So tampering is widespread, and it is occurring. And so am I concerned about having an open scrimmage for opponents to show up or the national landscape to send personnel here to watch that and then simply buy our players? Certainly. And so, yes, I'll consider what our spring practice might look like in terms of a spring game. I'd love, to generate momentum and excitement for Utah State football, to connect with the community. I might move that to the fall, right before the season starts, something like that, where the roster, can be solidified without the risk that we're talking about. Because I would love our fans and those that support our program to see our team. I now have to manage that in the context of what's best for the program with a spring window. And I think most are referring to Matt Rule at Nebraska talking about, that experience, losing 6 players after their spring game. There's really nothing that's preventing anyone that's looking for players or has an interest in one of our players to show up to the spring game, assess them again in real time with their eyes on them, and then here's the window, and then offer them, and then try to have them leave for their program. So yes, it's a concern. Yes, we'll address it. How, I'm not quite sure yet. But I'll do so in the way that's best for our team and best for our community and best for our fans. And I think, once our folks and the supporters of our program understand why, they'll support that. And I'll do the best I can, again, probably in the fall as we get ready to play, of maybe staging something else similar, that will allow us to connect.
Hi, Coach Mendenhall. Jason Turner from the Herald Journal.
Hey.
Malekia, Ella Filipio, I'm going to slaughter some names here. Ty Olson and Caleb Mitchell are all wide receivers that really kept the recruitment under wraps and announced it on social media. I've seen Malekia play quite a few times at Crimson Cliffs. I know he and Ty have sub-11 speed in the 100-meter, and Caleb is 6'6". All these guys are pretty highly recruited. How much upside do these 3 kids have?
Those 3 players are all exceptional and in their own way. As you think about Caleb at 6'6", and he might be taller than that, but his range, his catch radius, and his speed, what a giant target and effective player that he is. And the other 2 you're mentioning, Ty, the simple volume of production. If you watch his highlight film, but then substantiate it with the numbers, facts are our friends, the amount of production is unheard of, in terms of a high school career. And then, really cool in terms of Malachi, and I have a history with my coach's uncle at Louisiana Tech a long time ago. And so Selu Alofopo, his father, Malachi's dad, this is all I've just learned through this. So we now have Samson Alofopo from New Mexico military combined with now Malachi. And Malachi, is sub-11. He's so fast and so active and so productive. You put those 3 receivers together, I'm really encouraged. So Coach McGivern and our offensive staff, adding those 3 young wideouts, it's going to be really powerful.
Talking about specific players, a couple I wanted to ask about: Titan Jones, Titan Saxon, guys who have pretty close ties to the Cache Valley area. I know Titan, this guy you're recruiting in New Mexico. What can you tell us about these 2 guys? I know Titan's coming from Snow College.
Yeah, love Titan, and he's tough, he's aggressive, he's productive, and he's experienced. And we needed that at safety. So again, the production, certainly the experience, as well as the mindset. And anytime you can have a player of that caliber and have someone locally as well, that's amazing for the community. It's amazing for the family and the families. but it's also amazing for our team. And so, yeah, I would love for every player, Cache Valley specific, that is productive and capable, right, that they stay. And they were the first schools I visited. Again, Titan had committed to us at New Mexico, came with us now to Utah State, which I'm so thankful for. And gosh, yeah, in terms of our Bear River player, which is just right around the corner as well, what a great player. Same thing, we wanted him at New Mexico as well, and it kind of came down to Utah State. So we ended up kind of coming to him rather than vice versa. And physical and athletic and tough and productive. If every good player in this valley stays at Utah State, to me, that's the epitome of what Utah State is. And then we expand that simple circle that starts in Cache Valley throughout the entire state. And again, that could be up to 17 players, maybe more, out of this state per year. The quality of high school football in the state, the number of players that are qualified, that doesn't mean we're compromising quality. We're getting great players that fit in line with our program. When you can go to Bear River and Skyview or Snow College as well, that makes it even better.
Eric Franson with 106.9 The Fan.
Hey.
You talked about evaluating the current roster for Utah State, also evaluating their incoming recruits. So after you've done that, you've seen and gone through this recruiting cycle, like where is this team headed? Like,
Yeah.
what do you see out of this team now with guys who are here already and these other guys that are coming in to supplement some of those holes that may have existed with the transfer or other reasons?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's still early, and so I know everyone want to know how we're going to be and to project. What I would say at this point is our needs have been addressed based on our evaluation to this point, and so that sounds short of promising, which it is. And so I'll put it in context for you. As we arrived in the hiring of my timing, that was after finals, so the team was gone. Right, there were just a handful of players still here, which I was able to see in person. Transfer portal opens. We recruit the transfer portal. Again, school starts here the 6th of January. Players have to be enrolled by the second week. Basically, our transfer and our portal recruiting was open and closed before we saw our team in person and before we saw them work out. And so everything we've done now based on film, gosh, we addressed those needs as best we could, which I think we did really well. Now that we've seen our team work out and been with them and the personalities and the chemistry, I'm excited about the grit, the determination, the toughness, competitive spirit of this team with still probably a handful of needs we still have remaining. And so we haven't perfectly addressed our needs, but the majority we have, and maybe 4 or 5 player or spots remaining, I think we still might need to address post-spring. That would be barring any more attrition from our program, either through the off-season or spring practice. I think we did really well. And I like the players we've added. I like the needs we've addressed. I like the roster we have, again, with a handful of existing needs still remaining.
And could I just ask a follow-up on that? Just if you wouldn't mind commenting on just the evolution of recruiting, where it's not just going and visiting high school kids anymore. You're having to recruit your active roster as well, and just how that's kind of evolved and changed for you.
Yeah, it starts with your current roster. Just like I said, not only trying to help and advise current players on this team, whether they might fit or not fit with the new staff that arrived, right? That happens everywhere, and we tried to do that in a timely way to give everyone the most time to know where they stood. But the next part is, and quite frankly, recruiting your own roster now, the collectives ties you directly to, right, your retention of your roster. And so the thought that, right, and maybe put it this way, what college football used to be is if I were recruiting the two of you and I was going to offer one of you a scholarship and the other come as a walk-on, really the scholarship player would have a great chance to possibly come. The walk-on's probably saying, no, I'd like someone else that really wants me. That basically is the equivalent now, especially in the transfer portal. If you're looking for someone in the portal, but you're not then willing to offer something in terms of financial compensation, they're taking that they're a walk-on. And so the landscape, and it really doesn't matter whether folks like it or not, right? The landscape has shifted to where the quality of your collective is determining the retention and assessment and recruitment of anyone in the portal. And that is matter of fact. It's matter of fact in the Mountain West Conference. It's matter of fact in what will be the Pac-12. Any conference, the quality of your roster now is tied directly to your collective. And then whatever happens with the house settlement, that will influence as well. And so gosh, that's a very unique landscape. I feel like I'm on a movie set sometimes as an actor participating in that, like, how are we here? But that is where we are. And so, gosh, I work to navigate that in as moral and ethical and human development way as possible, what I think is the coolest plan in all of college sport, the way that we do it here, which I'm not going to share. But I think we do it outstanding, and I think it fits perfectly for Utah State. Again, I'm talking portal specific, which is the front end of your roster and the retention part that you're talking about and recruiting your own roster. The high school players, gosh, maybe the windows of and the market of whatever the world will call 5-star, right? And maybe some of them, right? The collective and the money and the financial component is really embedded at the same level. But for most high school players, that's not the same world. And could it end up being the same world? Certainly, over time, but the entry points are different. And so you're really back to your question of recruitment. Here's one set of kind of rules of engagement in terms of the portal and retention of players and getting players with experience. Here then is the high school recruitment, which is still different than what it was, but maybe more similar to what it was than maybe the divergence has happened. And you put all that together and being able to toggle back and forth, and the time frames and the signing periods, that really is what recruitment is at this point. Knowing there's another window coming, and back to the first question of spring games, you would have one because the answer might be because of the revenue it generates for fans to come for your spring game. What if that's at the expense of 6 or 8 of your best players then being seen and then being moved from your roster with now really not much chance to replace them before your season starts? So that's something that's evolving and is real.
Jason Turner again. Just wanted to ask you specifically about Gage Yardley. You don't get guys from that small schools, but I know he's a really good 3-sport athlete. What makes him such a dynamic and well-rounded player, and what ultimately do you envision him playing in Utah State?
Yeah, we love Gage, just like we love Tyden Jones from Bear River, right? Different players, but man, is he physical. He's a great athlete. He's so productive. He can play multiple spots. You see him run the ball. You see him catch the ball. You see him tackle. You see him intercept. And so he plays safety. To me, the size of the school is not relevant. I've evaluated so many players, and those skills show up regardless of size of school or competition. And when you have smaller school players, the more dominant they are, right, the more accurate you are. Gage takes over a game. You can't watch the game without just saying, after maybe 3 plays, who's that? And so he's currently a big safety. He reminds me a lot, and it's kind of dangerous to make comparisons, but we had a player at Brigham Young University named Jordan Pendleton, and man, what a good player he was for us. Gage is similar. So he's a big safety. Could he be an apex player like a Sam linebacker in a field space that just where he deters any offense from heading that direction? Somewhere between the safety apex player, outside linebacker-ish spot is where he is. And he's early on a 4-phase special teams player because he can run and hit and tackle well. And perfectly aligned in terms of the type of person. If you're saying, gosh, bring him from Richfield to Logan, that's a perfect marriage. And how their family is and the values that have been instilled in him, really excited about him.
You mentioned you felt like you addressed some of the needs that you had when you identified when you first came in. There's some you still want to address. What are the areas you felt like you addressed fairly well, at least for now, and what are the areas you feel like still need to be addressed with recruits?
Yeah, so I think we've addressed all the areas that were needs. The question will remain, are we deep enough? And so the remaining spots are not areas we haven't addressed. And quite frankly, I won't be able to tell you for sure until we actually play. And I'm talking spring practice on how well we truly addressed our needs. But every position that we needed was addressed in a comprehensive way. Are we deep enough? That really is the question. So the handful of needs remaining will be possibly adding another player, right, for what the season will take its toll on, and to make sure that we can stay healthy enough with the quality we need to have the results we want. And so really, that doesn't mean any players we bring we're only bringing to be a backup. That just means we're looking for the best players possible for positions that we might not be deep enough at. And we have a pretty simple rule, right? Greater than, not equal to. So any player we're adding, we want to be greater than, not equal to what we have. That could be position units as well, where it needs to be greater than, not equal to where we currently are. Until you play football, that means what spring practice looks like, the accuracy is still kind of at risk. So I'm confident our needs have been addressed. Are we deep enough with those handful of spots we're talking about? That's really what I was referring to.
Whether we like it or not, the quarterback gets talked about probably more than any other position. What can you tell us about Anthony Garcia and how he gets into the mix of what you already have on your roster?
Yeah, Anthony, and it's fair because the quarterbacks are, whether anyone says it out loud, is the most important position on the team and determines trajectory more than, gosh, maybe even the head coach. So Anthony Garcia, for our fans and for others that haven't researched him already, was at San Jose State. So Coach McGivern had experience with him. The coaching staff at San Jose State goes to the University of Arizona. Anthony Garcia goes to Arizona, remains or was as a backup player there. Arizona's quarterback choosing to stay. Coach McGivern comes to Utah State. Anthony Garcia then comes from Arizona to be here. And so what I love about that is the history and the vetting and the person and the player. All that has been known and seen. And when that happens, there aren't any misses. Does that mean he's our starter? That's not what it means. But it does mean we know what we're getting. And he knows what he's getting with a coach and a system that he's already committed to once. And so for both parties, that could be really powerful. I like our quarterback room. I think we're deep, and I think we're competitive, and that gives our program a great chance to have success. So I'm really excited about him. But I'm also excited about others we have as well.
Obviously, you brought in a lot of guys from New Mexico. Those are the guys you know. I think I counted 7 of them at least that have come in. Obviously, these are the guys that you know the most, that you've coached. What can you tell us about some of these players you've brought in?
I think, and again, I don't want to express this group as favorites or preferential. These are players that, much like we just talked about with Anthony Garcia, we know, right? I've seen them every single day, and they've seen me every single day, and they wanted to come. That mitigates risk for everyone, right? So they have a chance to be fulfilled and have a great experience with someone they trust, and vice versa. And so you'll see some secondary players on there, including a team captain from a year ago, Noah Avenger. And so there's secondary players that are proven, seasoned, and experienced. There's a defensive lineman that you'll see in A.J. Harris, proven, seasoned, and experienced. And you'll see Javen Jacobs, really a productive player offensively for us. Broke his collarbone here in Logan a year ago. I think we get one more score in our postseason in our first year at New Mexico if he stayed healthy. But anyway, broke his collarbone here in this game. Really productive as a running back / slot / returner. So those are players that I know and trust. They're not guaranteed a thing in terms of starting or in terms of what their role will be, other than an opportunity. They came for the opportunity. I brought them for the opportunity, and that was enough for us both to say this could be a good fit.
Yeah, Aaron Falk with the Tribune. Just going back to the spring game dilemma, I'm wondering what you maybe would like to see from the NCAA, or just sort of a type of enforcement change that kind of prevents this tampering, or maybe doesn't put you in a position to have to debate whether to have the spring game.
Yeah, really good question. I'm not sure the tampering is preventable. If grown men leading programs won't play by the rules, then what an indictment against the world of leadership in sport. But that's currently what's happening. And so I don't think there's an enforcement staff currently that can pull it off. I don't think there's a governing body that can currently pull it off. I think the guidelines and the rules have to be simply more powerfully designed to where it can be governed. But it's clearly not. And I'm not sure you could find a head coach at any level that says it is being governed well. And so we're really having to make choices now as leaders and how we run our programs to try to protect our players as best as possible. But the tampering, even up to a week ago for our program, players are being offered. There's no portal window open. There's no anything. And third parties are being contacted to reach out to players, and money's being offered. And it's really year-round at this point. And so what a significant challenge. I wish I had more answers for you. But currently the size of enforcement staff versus the magnitude of the level of tampering is now leading a really prominent head coach at a really good program to say, maybe one of the ways that I'm going to now address this is just not to make my players accessible in a spring game format. So that's a profound statement that reflects the magnitude of the issue, and that's really where we are. I wish I had more solutions other than just self-governance.
Trent Wood with the Deseret News. I'm curious, settled might be the wrong word, but have you kind of settled into being at Utah State? Has the staff kind of gotten comfortable, or how long does that take since you've experienced taking over programs?
Yeah, great question. I remember at the University of Virginia distinctly after my third year feeling like we were settled. So we had gone year one, we made it postseason year two, we shut out South Carolina in a bowl game year three. In the meantime, we'd been in a hotel, an RV, renovated a house, built fence on a property, recruited a few classes, and after year three, I felt like, yeah, this is now home and sustainable. Our coaches are all over the map. Holly and I and my family, we're in an Airbnb currently above a garage here in Logan. Others are during the coaches, I gave them the weekend off, so they're already out of the building, and some are transitioning to Logan now. Others won't be here till after this upcoming semester with their kids in school, and so we're all over the map currently. It certainly isn't 1 year, and it certainly isn't by spring practice. Sometimes by the end of your first season, maybe at the same time that we're talking next year, you can breathe a little bit better. Maybe yards are in whatever house you got. Maybe the boxes are unpacked. Maybe they're not. But at least there's a daily rhythm that's starting to occur and a cadence. So at least a year, but I would say year two, sometimes year three, which doesn't mean you have to have results during that time as well. Otherwise, you might as well not unpack your boxes, right? But usually about year three is when there just seems to be a sense of normalcy that occurs, and based on past experience.
Hey, Coach, Patrick Mayhorn from the Ag Ship. There's a lot of length that you've got in this class at linebacker and the defensive backfield, really just in general, but especially those positions. How important was that to add a little bit more length and size at those spots?
Yeah, I love length and size, so I'm glad you picked up on that, especially on the defensive side, but also offensive skill. Length and size, especially, again, I'll talk defensively first. So really good defensive players, they beat blocks and make tackles. Rarely is someone unblocked in the world of college football to make a play. So the good players, right, when unblocked, make a plays. The great ones can beat blocks and make plays. The longer and the further away an opponent is away from you, you can keep them away from you, the more chance you have to get off the block and make a tackle. Same thing offensively. Gosh, the more length and size, the more you can reach away from a defender, the more you can keep a tackler away from you with a stiff arm. Same thing with the offensive front. So length and size are foundational to kind of the way that I like to bring in players.
You mentioned the importance of NIL collective quality. How would you assess where Utah State is at this point in the process?
We're at the very beginning in an infancy stage of where we need to be. So there's momentum being generated. There's education happening. But we're still significantly behind, not only where I just came from, but where we need to be. And so I'm excited about the trajectory. I'm encouraged by the momentum. I see the results coming. It's going to have to be a significant effort on my part, and the education and just simply the magnitude of what will have to happen for Utah State to remain relevant with the ability to have a roster that's needed year in and year out. And so we're behind, but where we're headed with urgency, speed, and trajectory, I'm encouraged about.
You mentioned ideally that you would like to recruit primarily high school and use the portal sparingly to fill holes. In an ideal situation that you obviously don't have at this moment, do you view the portal as a way to bring in veteran talent who can contribute immediately, or do you view it more as an opportunity to bring in young talent who maybe just hasn't developed yet?
Yeah, the first. I view the transfer portal as, gosh, we're desperate and they're desperate. They need a place to play, and things haven't gone well wherever they've been, and we have an immediate need that has to be addressed for the next season. The rest of it, I really would like high school players to be grown and developed and built within our program to where we have sustainable, consistent talent and a program with a really clear identity. That means we have to build relationships strong enough to to hold our players when others come and tamper and try to pull them away financially. And so, do I ever see it being mutually exclusive, where it's either the portal or high school? No. Junior college is still a bridge in there as well. But I'd like to see our shift. Again, this year it was 17 4-year, 12 high school. I'd love to see at least it flip that way to start and maybe even expand. That'll have a lot to do with the players we're developing, the relationships we're building, the culture we're maintaining, where players really want to stay. And that will happen over time.